With everybody on a time schedule, we're going to start the meeting. How many people do we have on? One? Four? Okay. Right. Good evening, everyone.
Folks, we get started.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Harry Bird meeting at the Instructional Support Center at Sequoia. We will please stand and pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So I welcome everyone for coming out tonight. David will be introducing the speaker, who happens to be Mr. Ed Romaine, the supervisor of the town of Brookhaven.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Supervisor Romaine.
Thank you. You want me to stand somewhere special? Or?
No, once I'm done introducing, you can do it right from that seat if you like.
Okay.
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
Comfortable sitting down.
So I'm not going to read your whole bio because I think that's part of your story for us tonight. But,
Right.
Supervisor Romaine has been involved in public service for at least 38 years. And not to date anybody, but as somebody who grew up in Eastern Long Island, I feel like your name has always been something I've recognized from a child moving forward. Really happy to have you here tonight. Really happy to hear your story, and really happy to hear how how the town of Brookhaven has been operating under your leadership, and we're happy to hear about your future. So welcome, Supervisor.
Well, thank you. And I'll just give a very brief story or bio because they suggested I just kind of run through my bio. I started life as a teacher. I spent 12 years teaching. I taught in the Hot Box School District. I was active in the teachers union. I was treasurer of my teachers union, whatever. And always had an interest in politics and worked on the side as a volunteer. And in 1979, the people I were working for, they were not in the majority. They were in the deep minority. I think we had one elected official from my party in the town of Brookhaven in 1979, and that was Joe Lefkowitz, who later became supervisor. But in 79, that was a year in which my party swept the elections. And they came to me and said, how would you like to work for the town? I said, not really, I'm a tenured teacher. But they offered me a part-time job as a federal and state aid coordinator. I took that job because I had done federal and state aid work on the side for Hot Box schools. First thing I did is get a multi-million-dollar grant that the federal government conditioned on staff. And they said, can you help us? So I took a leave of absence and eventually would wind up taking 3 leaves of absence and then leaving teaching. And I became Brookhaven's first director of community development and housing. And I did that for 5 years. And it was a great career because you could use, it was all federal dollars. You could use federal dollars to help do things like water mains, improving housing, building infrastructure, things of that nature. And in 1985, I was elected to the county legislature from what was then the 2nd district, which went from Eastport to Bellport and North Decorum. I did that for 2 terms, and then I ran for county clerk. The county clerk had died. There was a special election. They asked me to run. I was elected 5 times as county clerk and wound up serving 16 years as county clerk. Totally different job, very interesting, very administrative, very not policy in the sense that you spent on making things run right. And then I left and ran for the legislature again. Now, I had moved, but my district totally moved. So I live in Santa Mauritius. I wound up representing all of Eastern Brookhaven, Riverhead, town that you come from.
You say that.
I know, but I heard it anyway. Riverhead, Southold, and Shelter Island. And I ran 4 times. I was very fortunate. People out there were very good to me. I didn't lose one election district anytime I ran. And then I went back to the town of Brookhaven as supervisor. I never thought I would go back, But I had a son, and he was elected twice as a councilman, and he always thought about being supervisor, but he died very young. And I thought about him. I said, gave it a try. Brookhaven Town has councilmatic districts because we're a very large town. We're larger than Nassau County, largest geographic in the state, second in terms of population with 500,000 people. And we had divided the town into 6 councilmatic districts. I carried all 6 each time I ran, the only supervisor to carry all 6. No other supervisor has ever done that. I've done that each time I've ran. I've ran 5 times for supervisor. And I was debating either retiring or running again for supervisor, but then my party came to me and asked me to run for county executive. So I was nominated. I'm now a candidate for county executive, and that election will be this fall. In between, when I was county clerk, I had some nights that were free. As a legislator, as a supervisor, no nights that are free. But with those free nights, I wound up teaching 7 years at Dowling. I taught managerial economics. And then someone said, hey, it ain't helping the pension. So I moved over and taught 7 years, all the histories at Suffolk. And then I wound up teaching public policy at Stony Brook. But once I went back to the legislature, I had no time for that. So that's a little bit about my career, a little bit about Brookhaven Town. The town didn't always have the best reputation. Some people call it Crookhaven, which I always hate. And I went in there determined to change the trajectory of the town. And I think I've done that in 11 years. We've had no scandals, no bad news, no nothing like that. And we've worked on making this town environmentally possible. Each time I've run, I've been endorsed by the Sierra Club, the New York State League of Conservation Voters, and the Long Island Environmental Voters Forum. So I have a very pro-environment agenda. Each time I've run, I've been endorsed by the Federation of Labor. So I have a labor-friendly view of life. So I hope people ask me questions and I can answer them about the town of Brookhaven. The town is like most government, still evolving and improving every day. It's not perfect, but we're trying to get there and making more efficient, more effective, and do the things. I can talk a little bit about some comparisons. Unlike the county of Suffolk, the town of Brookhaven has cybersecurity insurance. Unlike the county of Suffolk, we put all of our data center in the cloud, which makes it less likely to be hacked. Unlike the county of Suffolk, we have conducted periodic penetration tests to make sure we know our weaknesses and we shut all of our back doors. Government isn't rocket science. That's why when I look at the county, somewhat surprised. And I spent almost 27, 28 years as an elected official of the county, that in the last few years, they've let things slide a little bit. So happy to answer any questions about whatever's on your mind. No one has any questions?
I have one.
Sure.
So in public education, we often find ourselves dealing with our state elected officials because most of, that's where a lot of our funding comes from.
Sure.
A lot of the laws and regulations, and more so, especially over COVID, we were interacting with the county more than ever because of the Department of Health. How do you see the town of Brookhaven or townships in general partnering with school districts, or how could we be better partnering with townships across the United?
Well, we have 69 school districts in Suffolk County. We used to have 72, but some of them went pipeline. Eastport, South Matta combined and other things, but you're all essentially in the same business. There should be a commonality there. And the county can certainly work to coordinate. We were looking for more efficiencies and for more state revenue. We were told that Brookhaven was a city. We would increase our state aid by 20 times. So we looked at that. One of the drawbacks to that would be we'd have one school district. Could you imagine the 20, I think it's 23 or 24 school districts in Brookhaven, if we came in and said, now we have one school district? We did not go with that idea, even though the revenue was appealing. But are there efficiencies and commonalities among school districts? Absolutely. Could school districts benefit from working together, at least the business model of school districts? Because education is a very subjective thing and it differs from teacher to teacher, classroom to classroom. But there are certain the business of running a school and a school district, there are many things that you do alike. And I realize there's all types of school districts, from New Suffolk, which I represented, which is a K through 4, and had a superintendent who lived in Arizona at the time. So I'm very familiar with that. So yeah, so the school districts do differ, but there's a commonality of functions in terms of the business side of running the district that we could look at and do things. There's a commonality in terms of data, of computer services, of a whole host of services, janitorial service, a whole host of things that you might get an economy of scale if you work together. But so far, I guess BOCES is supposed to be working on that.
Yes, we do quite a bit, especially with the here in the network.
Right.
And what do you find down at Brookhaven right now?
Money. All issues of government are issues of money. Now, as town supervisor, I put together 11 budgets. Each of those budgets have stayed under the tax cap. And so, oh, that's 2%. Sometimes it's much less than 2%. Years ago, it was like 1.25 or something. Like, whoa. And the reason why is because people always are demanding more services that they don't want to pay for. So we have to be careful and we have to balance. All my budgets have been structurally balanced. And when I came to the town of Brookhaven, it did not have the best rating in the world. 1 year after I came, we received a AAA bond rating and have remained AAA for the entire tenure of my supervisorship, which means we can go into the market and borrow money at a much lower rate. We just went in. We hadn't borrowed for many years, but we just went into the market for a $56 million bond. It came with a 2.35%, which people could not believe because we are stronger. Our bond rating is stronger than the sovereign, meaning the United States government. So I am very focused on finance because I understand that's what drives school district, a government, a town. Show me how you raise your money and then show me how you spend your money and I'll tell you about your district. So I am very focused on that. I don't believe in spending money that we don't have. In the last 3 years, I paid off $150 million bond of debt that the town had because I didn't want the debt to income ratio to get out of whack. So I am very focused on the finances of the town because if you don't have the money, you can't do the job. And I try to do it without raising taxes because you know what the complaint is? We pay too much. And when I look, but people are leaving Long Island. They're leaving because of high taxes. I know the governor thinks we should build more housing. And we do need more housing, but not housing. We need more affordable housing. And let me tell you, there should be no mystery about affordable housing. Builders don't build affordable housing unless they get some type of subsidy, because builders usually build unaffordable housing. That's how they make their money. So if the government has a policy that they want to promote affordable housing, they have to do something, whether it provide a land, provide a mortgage subsidy, provide a rental subsidy, something to make that affordable. Because the materials, forget it. Do you know what inflation has done to building materials? If anyone tries to build a building, they'll know. It's outrageously expensive. A 2x4, 5 or 6 years ago, $1.29 max. About 2 years ago, about $6. Now about $8. That's what inflation does. Inflation is a hidden tax, and we have to deal with it because during the pandemic, it was a national emergency. The government decided to open up all the purses and spend money that they don't have. And how can they do that? Well, they have something I don't have. It's called the printing press. That's how they did it. So they just printed more money and the value of money became less. And that's what drove inflation. That's where we are now. And now what are the Feds trying to do? The Feds are trying to drive the Federal Reserve is trying to drive down inflation by raising interest rates. Caught a couple of banks on the short end. They had loaned out the money and the interest rates went up. Whoops. Signature Bank, bye-bye. Silicon Valley Bank, bye-bye. But so I'm focused on the finances of the town. We have a big moneymaker in the town, which is going to close. It's called our landfill. Since landfill was built by the state in 1974 and turned over to the town in 1976. Beginning in 1989, the town has decided only to take ash and construction debris are the only two things that go. Garbage does not go into the landfill. So that's a big issue. We send our garbage to Covanta, the plant in Westbury by Roosevelt Mall. Can't miss it. Meadowbrook Parkway's got the smokestacks. And we pay them to take our garbage. They, in turn, pay us to take our ash. Not only our ash, but we take ash from Hempstead Town, which is population-wise the largest town in the state, 750,000 people. And we take ash from Huntington, Smithtown, and Iceland. And it's a combination that gives us some money. We take construction debris. I hope the construction debris is construction industry is ready because there's only two sites that takes construction debris on Long Island. One is 110 Sand and Gravel, and the other is Brookhaven Landfill. When I was elected, we had to make a determination about the future of the landfill. It's at 270 feet. My predecessor, who resigned midterm, I was elected in a special election, Mr. Lesko, wanted to take it to 325 because it's such a moneymaker. I made the decision not to do that. And as a result, I put the landfill on a path for closure. We estimated it would close in 2024. And it will, through construction debris. What we did not calculate is that we would have a huge drop off of construction debris because of the pandemic. So there's extra room. So probably what's going to happen is we'll stop taking construction debris in 2024, but we'll continue to take ash for at least 2 years, and then we'll fill it up and close it. Now, what's going to happen to the landfill? Landfill is about 500 acres, of which the landfill itself is about 200, 225, 250 max. We have entered into a deal with NYSERDA, which is a state energy department, to lease all of that land on the top of the landfill, the sides, et cetera, for solar. I'm a big proponent of alternative energy. That will produce probably $100 million for the next 25 years. The lease alone, we'll still own the property. I'm also a big proponent of alternative energy, and I got in on the wind early on. And we are dealing with Sunrise Wind. Sunrise Wind is about 35 miles south-southeast of Montauk Point. And they had an earlier small wind project that tried to land in East Hampton and got nothing but grief and suits. I said, don't worry about it, come to Brookhaven. So they are landing Sunrise Wind, which is a huge project. It's like 990 megawatts of power. And they're landing their line at Smith Point, running up William Floyd Parkway, some side streets, Horse Block Road, and then on the expressway. And you know where Island 16 is, the movie theater? Just west of there, there's a substation. It's going there. To run their underground line, we are getting $170 million over 25 years, of which the town will see 135, and some of the other small school districts, et cetera, will get some of that extra money. So we're kind of making up for what we're losing with the landfill, but not exactly. So I'm trying to land a third wind project, a second wind project for the town at Shore, where the nuclear power plant was. I don't know how many people know Shore. I used to represent the area, but there's a small Lilco Road. It will go down there, a little bit on 25A, and then William Floyd, then west, probably to Comac, where there's another large substation. So I'm hoping to get that because that would leave the town in good financial state, would make up for the revenue loss from the landfill. Well, ask about other questions. That's.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Romaine. I've been hearing from many people that I know of towns out, especially out East Hampton, Southampton, even some school districts about the difficulty they have in hiring for their positions. They said, you know, there's a brain drain on Long Island, and certain areas of teaching, office work, accounting seems to be a difficult one. You know, you get the civil service list and they leave you in about 2 weeks to go to private enterprise because I guess it pays better. Do you have that issue in Brookhaven? And what do you see?
We have more affordable housing in Brookhaven than they have in East Hampton. Okay?
Okay.
So, but affordable housing is a huge problem that we have to address. Because otherwise, people starting out in their career can't live here. We need people starting out in their career to build their lives, their families, and we need them to stay in Suffolk County and on Long Island. And there's a lot of things that work against us. We have a lot of traffic, depending on where you're going, even in East Hampton. Yes, try traveling west, or try traveling east in the morning with the trade parade. So we have all those problems. So we have traffic problems, you know. We have quality of life problems, etc. And we have high taxes. And a lot of the high taxes come as a result of the school districts. There's no question about that. And it depends on where you live, sometimes with school districts. The wealthier, when I say wealthy, I don't mean income, I mean real estate wise. The wealthier school districts can afford to tax less. The poorer school district, real estate wise, have to tax more. We have 69 school districts. It may have changed, but my last look, you know, what would be considered the poorest in terms of real estate values in Suffolk County of the 69? White Dance would be a carrot possible. Long would be possible, you know. Copeg maybe. It's actually it's worth Floyd. A lot of kids, a lot of houses, a lot of small lots. Not a lot of rateables, a lot of expense. What do you think their tax rate has to be to provide the same type of education that the school district I used to teach in? Hot Park. They have wonderful industrial parks. It's great. Not that the people there are very wealthy, although they're well off, but just that produces that.
Well, you don't give them taxes.
Yeah, what you know, that's something to think about. The first time I was in the legislature, I represented part of a community known as Ridge. Okay. And there was part of that was in the Longwood School District. And the part I didn't represent was in the Shoreham School District. And this was in the 80s. They had no lack because they were subsidized by what was supposed to be the nuclear power plant, which did not happen. I can tell you now because in my second trip to the legislature, from 2005 to 2012, I represented the Shoreham School District. They are scraping by because they don't have the ratables. So there's a question of equity in how we fund our schools. Someone suggested that we just fund students and not school districts, so that every child, regardless of where they live, would be entitled to the same amount of money for their education. Kind of a radical notion. Hasn't gone anywhere, but something to think about. So affordable housing is an important component, because if we don't provide for young people to have places where they can afford to live, they're not going to stay here. They're going to go to other states where they can buy housing or rent housing that's affordable. They may not get paid as much, but at least they can afford to live somewhere. We need to promote more affordable housing, not only for seniors, but for average working people, because there are firemen, there are volunteer fire people, there are volunteer ambulance company. They provide our teachers. They provide entry level. We have to think about the overall longevity of our island in terms of attracting people from various income levels and making sure they can afford a place to live.
Question had a part two.
Sure.
The part two is affordable rentals. Sometimes actually I look at the affordable rentals, they don't look all that affordable.
No, they're not.
And they may be, but in a affordable rental, the likelihood of saving a substantial down payment to buy a home, even in an affordable rental, is very difficult. How would you propose to help people who are renting try to purchase a home? Is there a way? I know he's.
Well, the county has a down payment program for people within certain income limits. And they'll help you, they'll give you $10,000, I think, is the current program in the county for people that meet these income limits for down payment. I don't know if that program's still active because I'm not with the county any longer. I'm with the town for many years, but something like that is extremely helpful because it's hard to save for a down payment. Very hard to save. I think what has to happen, I'll give you an example of something that I think is a wrong-headed policy. The county takes a lot of real estate in any given year from people who don't pay their taxes. Then they have an auction to auction off these properties. What I've urged the county to do is to take any of those properties that are in low to moderate income areas, and those areas are defined by census tract, and transfer that to the town so we can work with a not-for-profit like Habitat for Humanity, who I find is one of the better groups because they put people in these houses that normally could not afford them, and they fix up these houses. And I've urged that. And I've urged that for vacant land in low to moderate income areas. And you know who buys these houses in low to middle income areas? Yeah, landlords. Landlords. And while there are many good landlords, some that don't. And what you have to do in any community is make sure that the proportion of renters to homeowners don't become out of balance. Because if it's more renters, then you have a transient community and you don't have people tied to that community. So taking these houses and making them available for low to moderate income through different housing group, because county has no housing powers in the state. Counties have no housing powers. Only towns and villages have housing powers. And that's why they would transfer it to us, because then we could transfer it to Habitat for Humanity for no money. And then Habitat for Humanity does their thing. They interview people and they get people to fix up these houses. And they've done a marvelous job in Brookhaven Town. Marvelous job. And I would change that policy today, because at least you'd get some production for affordable housing. There is a law on the books that says any builder that builds over 5 units has to provide 10% of their units for affordable housing. So every development that you see that's a large development, 10% must go to affordable housing by law. And that's the Balboni, what's his name, the Napoli bill that was passed many years ago that I strongly supported, because builders then build. And I'd look at builders, and I'd be willing to give builders additional density if the additional density went to affordable housing. And you'd be surprised what low to moderate income is. I think family of four is like $94,000. It's not that low. It's 80% of the median income of Nassau Suffolk, the standard metropolitan statistical area. So, other questions? Yes.
Young people are students in.
I'm sorry, I'm going deaf.
Sorry. Can you speak to the importance of engaging our young people in government, particularly local government, and even to facilitate that?
It's critical for young people coming to government. Most of the people that work in government are not appointees. 90% of the people that work in government are civil servants. And you have to take a civil service test for that. And then you have to wait a long time for that test to get graded. And then governments can hire from the top 3, and you move down as you hire, and you get a position on the list. I'd like to say the civil service system had something to do with something, but it doesn't. I've taken civil service tests and I've done very well on them. Okay? But it usually doesn't have much to do with the job that you're going to get. The way you learn is on the job, not from taking the test. So the civil service test is not really related oftentimes. And the titles are extremely restricted. Now, the county does have a civil service system, but it was so frustrating to the Babylon supervisor that he formed his own civil service department, which is something he urged me to do in Brookhaven, but I didn't do. Civil service was introduced as a way to standardize people and make sure that patronage, hiring people for political reasons, did not dominate. And every job, every single job in government has minimum qualifications. Even the appointed jobs, you have to meet certain minimum qualifications, even for the appointed jobs, not so for the elected. So I have a couple master's degrees. It doesn't matter. But it really doesn't matter. But that's the way, if you want to work for government, you come in, unless you're looking to get an appointed job. And, you know, you still have to have some degree of qualifications, because the elected official that appoints you doesn't want to appoint people that don't perform, because that's a bad reflection on people. So that's local government. The same is true for the state. They have a civil service system. They have appointees as well. Same is true of the federal system. So in terms of pay grades, county pays the most, followed by the town, followed by the state, and the worst and lowest payers are the federal government. Particularly if you live in New York. Because whatever they pay you in New York, if they paid you in West Virginia, you're doing well, but not so well in New York. So if you're looking for pay scale, look at the county and the towns, because they pay the best. They pay much better than the state. Because again, if I live in Plattsburgh, I'm doing well, but not if I'm living in Nassau County or New York City. Yes,
Oh, so, well, it's good to see you again, Supervisor. We met in, Black History Month, so,
Okay.
February 3rd, you told me it's gonna be my day every year, so let's come next year.
yes, it is.
Oh, but just to piggyback on, what you just shared about civil service and Eastern Suffolk BOCES being a large provider of students with disabilities, the idea of eventually, wanting to reform that, because we know that with that minimal qualification, we do have students who are graduating with high school diplomas.
Right.
Who have the ability.
Absolutely.
To, as you just mentioned.
Well, let me talk about disabled people.
Right, and students.
You have to meet minimum qualifications, but you do not, if you are disabled, have to take a civil service test. You can qualify for, I think it's 55B. So if you're disabled, I had a guy that worked in my mailroom, but he had a disability when I was county clerk. And they came out, there's a test for mailroom supervisor. But he qualified because he was disabled for, I think it's 55B, which allows him, once he showed his disability and once he showed his minimum qualifications, he qualified for the job and he didn't have to take a test. So disabled people can go that route. So just so you know.
Thank you, sure.
And that may be helpful for some people in BOCES. Other questions?
Just have a comment. Federal's not so bad. I work federal.
Depends.
There's a stipend, extra.
Well, for New York, right?
Yeah, well, it goes, it's based on where you live. New York is one of the highest.
Right.
It's about 38% over pay of other people with the same job as me. So I remember being out of state working with other people.
Right.
And they said, come in for $1 million.
Yes.
Yes, very expensive, but I can tell you what, when you retire, you can't come and live on Long Island.
Right.
But when I retire, I can go live anywhere I want.
That's good. So what else can I help you with or answer for you?
Well, I had a question, Willie and I took about
Sure.
before. What's the balance with the IDA's granting tax abatements? Because what it's essentially doing is shifting the tax burden to the other taxpayers.
Okay, first of all, the state, we have in Suffolk County, the county has an IDA. 4 towns also have IDAs. Okay, Riverhead, Islip, Babylon, and Brookhaven. They kind of have an understanding in the 4 towns that the county does business in the other 6 towns because they don't have IDAs and stays out of, unless there's an agreement. IDAs are creation of the state legislature. They are agencies, just like authorities, like the Suffolk County Water Authority. It's not part of Suffolk County government. It's a separate authority. So these IDAs don't operate as part of local government. We have an IDA in Brookhaven. They happen to be in our town hall, but they pay us rent. They have a separate phone system, separate computer system. They're a totally separate system. They're set up by the state legislature. The state legislature approves them. What they're capable of doing is abating taxes to entice industry and businesses to come in to the particular area. In the beginning, the IDA in Brookhaven used to give a 10-year abatement. They don't do that anymore. They haven't done it for years. What they do is they do a pilot payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot payment. And what they do is they reduce taxes a lot in the beginning and gradually until after 10 years you're paying. It's usually 10 years. It could be longer depending on the project. And believe it or not, that's the way that works. So the town government has no direct control over the IDA. The only thing we do is we appoint board members. And the chairman of the IDA in Brookhaven has been there for 42 years. So we haven't had a lot of turnover. So he knows what he's doing. So what they do is they do abatements. Okay. Now, what the school districts do is they don't take him, they don't get involved. They have public meetings, they advertise who's up for consideration, and they don't get involved. If you get an IDA inducement, you're relieved of half the mortgage tax. Half the mortgage tax goes to the villages and towns, the other half goes to the state. So of course, the state isn't going to relieve you of their portion, so you can relieve of that portion. So we lose money on that. You're relieved of the sales tax for any materials you buy or machinery or stuff like that, but only of the local portion, not of the state portion. And then you're relieved of property tax. And no one is exempt from that. And they can give you a tax abatement of a certain amount, but usually what it does is it's a fractional abatement. You get very few that I know of, none in Brookhaven, give a full abatement. But the school districts never show up to the IDA. So they're silent about that.
I think it's working more with the Suffolk County IDA. Districts don't always necessarily, and I know they get notice, but things to be considered. They don't necessarily have the information or even a seat at the table. They can go to the meetings.
Well, you don't have a seat at the table because you're not a member of the IDA.
Correct.
And neither am I, neither is the town. But what you do have is a voice because they have a public portion and you can talk about that and the impact on the school district. But no one does.
Well, I think you have a voice also, like you say, Ed, because the school district, I know we worked with Breslin and Ron Parr.
Right.
Going back in the 70s, 80s. And then we just, Walmart on William Floyd. That was a workable deal going back maybe 15 years ago or more.
And what happens is eventually they go off. After 10 years, you're getting the full tax, which they may not have come to that location without that inducement. So that's the way that works. By the way, something that wasn't done in the past that is done now, housing is a huge user of IDAs, like Ronkonkoma Hub. All that is being built with IDA assistance. And now we're building warehouses like crazy in Brookhaven. We have applications for well over 5 million square feet of warehousing, well over that. I don't know if they'll all get approved, but they're all in trying to get IDA inducements. One of them is North Point, which is building 2.5 million square feet of warehousing at the old Brookhaven rail terminal. So that's huge. Someday they'll all be out of their inducements and come on full taxes. That's going to be interesting. Just like Breslin. All those units they built, the housing they built there, all going to come on. But the school districts are not vocal. And some are hit harder than others. And it's not that they're hit. You have a vacant piece of land that pays X. They build it, they get an IDA inducement, it's paying 3, 4, 5 times what the vacant land would be. And every year it goes up until it's full. So you're getting something where before you got very little or next to nothing. So it's not that school districts are getting nothing. They're getting more than they got before. And they have the hope that after those 10 years are up, they're going to have full. And it's like it goes up 10% each year to the full thing. Any other questions I can answer? Well, thanks for having
Thank you,
me.
Ed. Thank
Local
you.
government does a lot. I hope you stay in touch with your villages, the town, and county government. It's important. And see if it works.
Oh, then on behalf of us here, the Eastern Suffolk BOCES Community Legislative Committee, Give you the certificate.
Thank you,
Supervisor Ed Romaine right now.
thank you. Richard, bring it back. Thank you. This is a photo for Facebook. Because if you don't take photos, you're not doing anything. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Supervisor.
Yeah, put it in there, so it goes great. BOCES, you do a great job and you fill in a major portion of our education system in Suffolk County, Eastern and Western Suffolk, BOCES.